sort of waiting for the recording in progress. Apparently it didn't happen. Right, welcome everyone to the Flux Dev Meeting. Today is September the 1st. Let me just take a look at the notes from last time. Did we have any actions? No. All right. In that case, yeah, so the first agenda item is to review the project description. So if you have a look at the Flux discussions, it's 6:20. The discussion that happened a while ago, and this was about basically updating the project description of Flux now that, you know, the scope has changed last year, also bringing in Flagger and the GitOps toolkit and everything else. And it's sort of the one missing to-do item from incubation. So we sort of said, like, we'll update the project description until next time. Were any of you involved in the discussions around this? Or recall them?
I was back in the day, it looks like. I mentioned a couple of times, quoted. Yeah. And it looks like we talked about it in one of these meetings, at least once. What's the proposal? Like, what is there a latest proposal?
It looks like there's no final proposal yet. So on March 5th, looks like Scott had a chat with Cornelia, and something happened on the 25th of March.
Yeah, so Flux is a tool that watches both the actual state of your operations and the desired state declared in version source control, parenthesis, and automatically reconciles your delivery and operations wherever they live with when the actual and desired states diverge. Yeah, it seems a bit long-winded to me, but maybe it is worth spelling things out. What's the goal of doing this? Hang on, let's go back to the start.
Way too long.
It's twice as long as I just checked the original.
Yeah, a shorter one would be something like Flux makes Git the source of truth for your Kubernetes system. Or is that relying too much on people understanding what source of truth is?
Sounds fair to me. Does it capture like the entirety of what we do with the GitOps toolkit and Flagger? Is there more things we need to sprinkle in there? I mean, I like it. It's short, it's catchy.
Well, it's a summary of, without all the extra words, of what's proposed there anyway. Whether or not what's proposed there captures everything is another question.
I know, I'm for talking about continuous delivery in in the Flux short description, because source of truth, reconciliation, all that stuff are way too technical. I don't know if someone that is not head deep into Kubernetes and all things. Let's say you got a cluster, someone made it for you. I don't know, GKE, AKS, whatever. Next, you'll be looking for a delivery mechanism, right? Some like a CD tool, let's say. You'll search something with CI/CD or stuff like that, right? And if Flux shows up in that search result and talks about source of truth and reconciliation, you may think this is an internal Kubernetes thing, not meant for end users.
I mean, aren't you just swapping one technical term for another there? Continuous delivery.
I'm going to say the same thing, because I think continuous delivery is a pretty well understood term, and it stood out to me as missing from the description that you just shortened, clipped. Progressive delivery, continuous and progressive delivery seems like.
The progressive delivery has only just been coined. I mean, I don't think that's something that
Sure.
everyone understands.
No.
Continuous delivery, maybe, arguably. I agree to the point that might be the route in for lots of people, as they will, Google or do the equivalent of Googling Kubernetes continuous delivery.
Yeah, so for example, if you look at the Operators Hub description that I wrote here, is Flux is a continuous delivery solution for Kubernetes. That's it. That's the.
Yeah, but it doesn't really tell you anything about why Flux is.
Right.
What's particular about Flux, which, I mean, what?
Yeah, if you click more and go to the description page, there is a whole description there with features, who is made for like our README. But the tagline
if it's the project description, then the things that are particular to Flux are, I suppose, that it's continuous delivery, that it will probably condense a lot of description for people who know what continuous delivery is, and that it works with Kubernetes specifically, and that it kind of works with Git and other things like Git specifically. That's pretty much which is not true of Flagger, which is part of Flux, I guess. But.
Jenkins X describes itself as cloud native CI/CD built on Kubernetes. Let's see, Argo. Argo is declarative GitOps tool. Oxymoron here. Anyway, built to deploy application on Kubernetes. Yeah, so delivery, deploy, stuff like that has to be in there if we want to show up on a Google search.
But it doesn't have to be in it doesn't have to be in that particular thing to show up in the Google search, right? But yeah, I mean, something pithy would be good, I guess. I'm just sort of for actually saying concrete things rather than gesturing it terms, like you're not really telling anyone if you just say it's a continuous delivery tool. I think you have to go further and say, why is this one interesting?
So right now, Google picks GitOps at your fingerprints. fingertips. Sorry, Git offset your fingertips. I see. I recognize Daniel's touch here.
I don't think I was involved in the fingertips part of the discussion, but it certainly is on the website.
Yeah.
As opposed to all those other projects where you use your knuckles to type when you use them. But I mean, it's the description, right? So it's not like mission statement. It's not marketing stuff. It is not blah. It's not blah. It's just the here's the statement, that kind of the scope. This is the label on the box. So it should be reasonably short, fairly concrete, and not too florid, not too poetic.
So can you say it again?
Which one?
The one you proposed with Git.
Oh, the one I said before was Flux makes Git the source of truth for your Kubernetes system or something like that. Probably cut that down a bit, but I think you're probably right that continuous delivery is worth getting in there. So maybe something like Flux is continuous delivery from Git to Kubernetes, or whichever joiner words make the most sense in there.
Oh yeah. That's quite nice. Daniel, write it down.
I already did. I was typing.
And add your magic touch.
Where you were talking. I think what I'll do is I'll just paste this into the discussion along with the link to the video where we discussed it, and then then I'll bring it up in the contributors channel, and then let's give it another week where people can comment, and then we can sort of decide next week. What do you think? Sounds like no objections, which is great. Super. All right. Somebody wanted to talk a bit about GA. Whose item is this?
Yeah, I put that down. Mainly because I actually have something to say about it, but I thought it would be good to, maybe this could be a kind of running agendum that we do each week. Might help kind of surface what's happening with GA, keep us talking about it.
Yeah, edit as a standing agenda item.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, standing agenda. I just merged I guess, a sort of minimal port of image reflector controller to the new package runtime package. And that done, I can do the same for image automation. The reason I couldn't do it for image automation before is that it depends on the reflector API. So it needed something kind of stable, reflector API to point at. Although Stefan and I were just talking in another meeting about this, and it's probably okay. All the things that are being ported have a sort of parallel branch to main called, I think, reconciler dev or something similar to that. And it's probably okay just to point to that branch for modules while they're all kind of interdependent. So so you can't just update one and then update another and then update another. You have to sort of do them all and hold them in this state before they all sort of get merged to main. But anyway, the upshot is that I can go on and do image automation controller now, and then that's those two done. Santoshi, I think you're working on notification controller. Is that porting that to the runtime, new runtime package?
The notification controller presently, it was being worked on by Scott and the other engineers. They created like a fork. So, but Tamo is talking about me just doing it so that it's sort of quicker. Yeah, so that's where we're at now. They have,
Okay.
There's a branch that Scott made. So yeah, that's currently where the current work has been done is there.
Okay, so you can potentially cherry pick from that and then add whatever's needed on top and go from there. Great. Okay.
Yeah, it also notification controller has diverged a lot from that fork, mainly due to some touchy here. She added a bunch of new providers and other stuff to it. So yeah, also that branch has like, I don't know, tens of commits with fixes, rollbacks, and I don't know how cherry picking will, if it can be cherry picked as in Git cherry picked or cherry picked as in let's copy paste this stuff. I'm guessing copy paste is the way to go unless Santoshi wants to spend a week on cherry picking and history rewrite. And
yeah.
Not to mention this is the pull request is made against a fork. So it's not against upstream. So it's a fork, then another branch and a pull request.
Oh, I see.
That branch, that fork, and it's
yeah, okay. But that's okay. I mean, it's just good. Yeah.
We can, what you can do, Santoshi, is when you, let's say you port changes from that fork to the official pull request or notification controller, you can add to your commit. So you, let's say you copy paste a bunch of code from one side to your branch. You can add, when you commit it, co-author, co-author, and you can take the name and the email of the person that made the original code, and they will be added automatically by GitHub as co-authors to those changes. So instead of, you know, dealing with Git cherry picking, which is like terrible, I will just, you know, give the copyright rights the people that made those changes by adding them as co-authors. Copyright, it's not copyright, it's more about authorship.
Yeah, credit.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Credit, yes.
Cool. And then Hida's not here. Stefan, can you tell us about source controller, customize, and Helm controller, please, with regard to GA?
So the current status with source controller is that Hide has refactored all reconcilers except one. The last one is the Helm chart reconciler. And he'll be working on that next week. After we finish the chart reconciler and we merge that change to the dev branch in source controller, that's the moment where we can start working on Helm controller. As for customized controller also needs refactoring in terms of conditions, so we can better express the stages of the apply. We now have only two conditions, which is readiness and healthiness. But we also do dry runs, we also do decryption, we also do other stuff. We build the manifest, we patch the manifest. So the idea is to make the internals of the controller observable to the end user through conditions. So let's say we set the ready status to false, but there should be a condition where actually states which stage from all of those failed. What we do right now, we have that information in the ready message where we say customize build failed. Here is the customized build error. Oh, you patch something that doesn't exist or whatever. Having more granular conditions will help, I think, a lot other tools that are built on top of Flux. As I think the ready message that we also show when people do with Flux CLI, Flux get, Flux reconcile, all the commands will give you the ready message and the ready status. And that should, point to you what's going on without having to look at 100 conditions and so on. But when another controller, another machine creates customizations and watches for that customization, it will be better if we have more granular conditions. So what I'm trying to say is that the customized controller refactoring cannot be done. I mean, it can be done at stage 0, let's say, just port the current conditions to the new runtime. So we add the case status condition. Other controllers can, wait for a customized conciliation. Then stage 1 will be add more conditions, and also before GA, I'm thinking of switching from execing to kubectl to apply manifest to switching to server-side apply and use the controller runtime client to also apply things. Because with the shell exec, we have a bunch of issues around observability. For example, we report through Prometheus metrics how many API queries we do, but the heavy API queries are not made by the controller; they are made through kubectl exec, right? So you have no idea what the controller is actually doing with the API, if it's rate limited or not. Other things, we send a notification with what changed on the cluster based on the kubectl output that we parse, but the kubectl output does not contain namespaces for objects. So if you have, let's say, WordPress in 2 namespaces, you'll see 2 times WordPress created, or changed, where it changed, in which namespace, and so on. And the third issue that I hope to resolve with the server-side apply is around drift detection and better notifications. Like now we annotate everything, so every time you do a git push, you change something in your YAMLs, all objects are being reported as changed, but in fact you maybe changed 1 or 2, and there is no way to detect that with kubectl. We tried running kubectl diff, parse the output, it's terrible. So these are the 3 major pain points for users that we try to resolve with server-side apply.
Cool. And is there any other stuff going on for GA? That's sort of all the controllers, isn't it? The controllers and the and another potential thing, server-side apply. Is there any stuff, other prerequisites to GA? Is there any? What about on the documentation side? Daniel, Scott.
I'm not sure. So what I do know is that Alison is working basically on restructuring the docs somewhat. I'm not sure if this should be like a prerequisite. Like, I think it would be great. Like, I saw some of her research, and I think she's also talking to, you know, the tech docs team at CNCF to basically bring our docs more in line with how other docs look. And I think it's generally promising. Not sure if we should block on this. So it's good that she brings up some of her thoughts to this meeting as well, so we can all get an idea of where this is going, and then break it up into smaller chunks of work, which hopefully people who are generally interested in Flux and they're not comfortable working on code things, that they can maybe help with. So that would be the idea.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
What we currently have on our roadmap is developer guides for extending Flux. We only have that source watcher guide, which is not a controller with a custom resource definition. It's just a plain controller that watches for sources, and that's it. So it doesn't showcase the runtime package in its whole. So we have to have good documentation for our runtime library, and that's done. The Go doc looks great, but for that we also need like an introduction doc with links to Go doc and all of that, and give an overview of, hey, this is our runtime package, this is what you can do with it, and then write a different guide on how you can build a CRD controller, and have two examples, like source watcher like it is today, which is very, very simple. You watch for sources and you do something with whatever source controller brought from Git. And the other one is you have a custom resource, you update, you patch the status, you report the key status conditions and all of that. And the last thing I've added here on the roadmap are cloud specific guides. We currently have only the Azure one. We should be doing an AWS one for, I don't know, for secrets decryption with KMS. There are specific things that Flux does with AWS, and also for Google Cloud as well. Same topic, KMS, how you generate the Docker pull secret and all of that. This information is spread out across our documentation. So it's there. We have docs on Google Cloud KMS, Azure KMS, on how you generate the Docker configs and all of that. But I think we should have like the Azure one, a small doc with links towards all these parts, and give people that are searching AKS continuous delivery a good landing page, a good start with Flux.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you sort of come into it, then you probably have already decided which thing you're going to use, right? We're on GKE or whatever, and therefore you want all the stuff to do with how to do things with GKE. Makes total sense, yeah. That's probably part of Allison's restructuring, or may form part of that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Even though it's its own thing, but
I think it is, Michael. Yeah, I really think it is. And the thing is, I don't. What you were asking earlier is, I don't think we should wait for the restructure. I don't think GA should depend on restructuring the docs. You know what I mean? Just in case, I don't think it should be like a hard dependency, because we could do this in the other order too. You know what I mean? Like, we could add the page that Stefan's talking about, and then once those become restructured to be separate pages, we would just do the same thing with that we're doing with the Azure doc. You know what I mean? Like, so we could do it. I guess I'm just saying like, we're not really blocked on it, but I do agree with you that it will relate once we get there.
Another thing that I see on the roadmap that Stefan linked. Multi-tenancy. Can anyone report on what's happening with multi-tenancy? Is it blocked on other stuff? I think last time it was mentioned it was blocked on rewriting all the controllers.
Yeah, so we have a proof of concept implementation of the multi-tenancy proposal around the principal idea, where we have this principal field in the customization, where you can specify either a user or either a service account. If you don't specify none, it searches for a user in our shape inside the Flux group and so on. Sontochi also wrote end-to-end tests for this. So we have a working version with a customization that has a principal set to a user, and it works as expected. And I don't think we should iterate more over this proof of concept. Right now, we should get the refactoring in, and afterwards refresh the proof of concept and take the decision then and look over it. There are some things that I asked Sontochi to do there for the proof of concepts. We kept backwards compatibility. If service account name is specified, then it will use the service account name, as if you would specify principal service account and name there. And by default, runs under cluster admin. There is a flag in the controller that switches that off, where it requires principal to be specified, or if it's not specified, it looks for it. If it's not there, it fails. So that's my thinking in delivering the multi-tenancy as a release candidate, so people can turn it on with the feature flag. After they've set up their principals, they run the Flux tenant, create tenant command that creates the user and so on. And then gather some feedback on the user experience, because it complicates things if we want to enable this by default. You can, for example, a Helm release. You can create a Helm release in a namespace, and you can say target namespace, a namespace that doesn't exist, and Helm controller creates that namespace. Well, all this stuff will no longer work, because by default, the principal has no access to creating namespaces. It's scoped to a single namespace. Health checking for customized controller. You have a customization in your Flux system, you deploy cert manager in its own namespace, then you tell customized controller, hey, verify the health check of all the things that you've just deployed. And all those things are not in the Flux system or whatever, wherever is that customization, it's in a different namespace. That will also fail. It will break everyone's clusters, because everyone deploys things like set manager and so on. So there are many things that we have to figure out before enabling the principal mode. So that's why I'm for not blocking GA on multi-tenancy, but I would release multi-tenancy as a feature flag before GA. So we have the principal fields everywhere in our APIs, and we have the whole structure there. And then we decide. I mean, I don't want to, for this experimentation with, hey, how can we do it if the feature flag is removed and everything must be there in this place. So I will not block on this decision the GA mode. I will block GA until we have the principal impersonation code everywhere with tests and everything else under the feature flag. That's my opinion.
I think it sounds like it's a tricky thing to feature flag, really, because you can't just then, like, if you don't think it's worth making it the default behavior now, then nothing's going to change about that. Like, it's not going to be a breaking change after GA. So you kind of either do it that way around now, or never do it that way around, and it's always behind a feature flag.
At least until Flux
A
3.
fine approach. Yes, exactly. At least until next major version bump.
Well, there are many ways on how we can guide users towards this mode of running Flux by default. For example, when you run Flux Bootstrap or Flux install, it will ask you, hey, do you want to enable, you want to do it in secure first mode and so on with all this enabled. Maybe we find a way to build the RBAC on our own. This is part of the proposal there around access control list. So based on the access control list, source controller, another controller actually create all these, we'll create namespaces, we'll create cluster role bindings and all of that. It will set up the namespace in such a way automatically that everything will just work. There are many ways of doing it. Maybe at Bootstrap, you ask the user for the list of namespaces which belong to tenants, and Bootstrap prepares the namespaces with roles, with everything restricted as the user wants, and so on. I mean, if we add things that make it easier for people to run with principal enabled, I think a lot of users will adopt it, even if they don't run multi-tenant. They just deploy different applications in different namespaces.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Even though it sounds really difficult, a lot of the stuff is mechanical. So you can make it easier just by giving people tooling to do those mechanical things. An alternative to a feature flag would be to make people choose. I think you sort of were gesturing at that, as in you have to provide this, either this one or this one. I think that's a good option, because then you don't have to decide later, I'll remove it or keep it or whatever. It's just from now on, you have to pick. And so you can pick easy mode or you can pick secure mode. And all the people that don't care can just pick easy mode, and that's really easy to do.
Yep.
But,
sorry, the upgrades won't opt you into the feature flag, then it's not a breaking change for those people.
No.
You'd like them to opt into the upgrades, but you don't have, you don't force them, and you don't, at least until we're ready to say the old mode is no more, which might be a long way down the road.
Yeah, a good option.
I wouldn't remove the old mode.
Yeah. One option that I think Michael was suggesting was you have run Flux Bootstrap, you have it there, right? The GA release candidate comes in. You run Flux Bootstrap to upgrade to the GA release candidate with the same parameters that you used to do, and that will fail. And it will say, hey, this flag is required. You have to set up the mode for running Flux after the upgrade. You can keep Flux running as it was before, but you have to set it there, or you opt in for the multi-tenancy impersonation by default. We shouldn't call it multi-tenancy. We should, because we want other users that are not doing multi-tenancy to use this mode. So I don't know, user impersonation. We have to figure out the name of the flag, but I'm for adding a flag with no default, but required. So people are aware that, okay, there is a new mode of running Flux. Why is this mode better? We can explain it right there in the CLI error message, what it means, with a link to a docs for better documentation. But
and then you give people an on-ramp to it. And that was what you were saying before, Stefan. You want people to try it out, but just not force it on them, right? So people that want to try it out and do some of the manual work themselves can do that, and then we will hopefully find out from that what things can be automated and built into the tooling.
We currently have users that are already doing it using the service account. We have users that they deleted the cluster role binding to cluster admin for customize and Helm controller. They created service accounts that can only do impersonation call, and they've set up with Kyverno a webhook that enforces service account name everywhere. For them is a change from service account name to principal service account name. That's an easy change to make. And for the controllers that shouldn't supposed to run as cluster admin, they already made that change. So the upgrade will be like, it will be very fine for them. But these are a very small portion of Flux users.
Sure, but I would expect it to be a growing number.
If we make it easy, it will be.
Yeah, we may actually help. We may actually help steer people into a more secure cluster setup. Yeah.
Cool.
Like even for example, with Kubernetes out of the box, you may not. It may not really be considered a very hardened installation. You know what I mean? But if they use Flux to set up everything from the ground up, we may actually help to encourage better security practices in Kubernetes in general.
Yeah, because it gives people a way to lock down access, doesn't it? So
yeah, because you can do it now. It's just that like that often, you know, if the options seem quite confusing to teams, they won't do it, you know, or they will just take whatever blog tells them how to do it the easiest way. Yeah, this is cool. It's pretty exciting.
So I'm for the technical work on multi-tenancy. That's what is in customized controller is, let's say, around 90% of the work done. We still have 10% to figure out how to do the same stuff for the Helm client. So Helm doesn't use kubectl and doesn't use the controller runtime client. They have their own thing. I don't know why, but they do. So we need to figure out how to inject all those stuff there. It shouldn't be hard because we already do it for the service account. Have to figure out how to switch from service account and token to impersonation. I really hope we don't have to change Helm itself to do that. But if we do, then yeah, it's going to take a very long time. So someone should definitely look into Helm internals and see if it can impersonate users with no service token. Because a user has no cryptographic identity inside Kubernetes. That's the biggest difference and challenge for tools that don't use kubectl. Because kubectl has a special flag which is called as, and you can and it impersonates users, groups, you name it. But I don't know.
If you can get at the transport, you can do it because you do it with the headers, right? So
yeah.
As long as you can do that, but that's not a given. Who knows? Okay, cool. I think that's all for GA talk. Unless someone wants to ask about something specifically.
If there's not another agenda item, we could circle back to mine. I apologize for being late. I don't know why I still have the,
Okay.
I don't know why I still have the event on my calendar from the old time. Gotta fix that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's Kignan's. I think Kignan just wanted to do.
Oh.
like
I just wanted to plug the bug scrub that it's tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. And there's a new calendar view on the main Flux CD IO webpage where you can find the Zoom link now, which is great.
Yeah, Yosas is on the call. He implemented it. Thanks a lot. And I used it earlier. It's very nice. You just click and then zoom and then off you go. It works.
Nice.
That's cool. Yeah, and actually before the other agenda item, just to connect with the documentation improvements that you noted, Stefan, are already listed in our roadmap. The developer guides for contributing to and extending Flux is something that I could probably work on pretty quickly, since a lot of that work for the controller collaboration or the controller refactoring is already consolidated. There's a top level README in the I don't think that's what should be translated one-to-one into the docs page, like you said, it should be a friendly introduction, but I think that we can at least summarize that, add some of the other meat from that initial Google Doc with HIDA, you know, link to all,
So,
yeah.
so here at this link,
Yeah.
when you open it, you have nothing. There are links to some stuff, right?
Yeah,
Here, this page should be the landing page where, you know, it says, hey, we have a runtime package. Here is the product, right? And I think you could work on this index page and I don't know, and then after you explain everything here in a pull request, maybe ask Sontochi and other people that are helping with the refactoring, which are not people that are also involved in the runtime package, like me and Hide, ask others how they feel about this page, if it's good or not, because I'm definitely biased being involved in all of this. So we need to make it easy for people that know Kubernetes and Go and have no idea about Flux, right? That's the whole thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when I was collaborating with you know, essentially onboarding other engineers into explaining how Flux CD package runtime works, especially around conditions. You know, it took a few meetings, but we really got like a good list of prerequisite readings and just very specific things that they're already linked in Kubernetes documentation and you know what I mean? Like, and so that list is already pretty good. So I think I can just put that together. I'll do that. I'll try to get some feedback and we'll see if we can get that part rolling.
Yeah, but before you do all of that, you have to add Flux to the.
I know, that's number one.
Page.
Yeah, that's number one. That's number one. And also I think like maybe a little bit farther down is to list the Helm controller in the description of the SDK, but because it is such a good example of a full use of the Helm SDK. There aren't that many out there that really make us full use. So
there is one more that does the same thing, but they forked Helm. So we
right.
didn't.
Who does not fork Helm, right? Who works with Helm upstream, right?
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Okay. So then, thanks. I just wanted to not pass that up. And then the agenda item is this this proposal like from
we discussed it
last year.
We discussed this earlier already.
Okay. Okay.
And I put in a bunch of notes. So generally the thinking was that we should make it a little shorter. So we tried to come up with something catchy. And my idea was that I put the discussion into the, into the discussion 620, and then also with a link to the video of this meeting, and then give people on Slack like another week to discuss this, and then we can revisit it next week.
All right.
Yes, thanks. We had a couple of people came up with things off the top of their head. So some more candidates that kind of really shrink it down without losing too much information.
Got it. That's awesome. Okay, so then I'm just going to put it to an action item for myself to watch that video.
Super.
To extract catchy, short Flux descriptions.
All right.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything else?
I do just want to mention one more thing about that. I'm really sorry. I don't want to take up more than my part of the pie, the time pie. But just with the one thing that has changed a little bit since then is in the GitOps working group, an Open GitOps project, revising the GitOps principles. One thing that really I think was a lingering ambiguity here that I really just want to make sure that we also address is, I would say that this came from a concept from Cornelia, but needs to be dialed back a little bit because it's causing some confusion, which is, that they reconcile essentially that your actual and desired states are reconciled whenever they diverge. it's really important to make crystal clear that the desired state always wins. You know, that whatever you have in your version controlled configurations always wins. They don't just simply reconcile. Yes, it's true that there's image automation in the Flux tool, and that other tools could do certain types of automation based on human rules that are set and not changed by machines, you know, or not changed, let's say, by your runtime environment or some agent running in your runtime. But that, and that does create a wider concept of convergence, like multi-directional convergence, but that in no way overrules the desired state that's specified. You know, everything that's updated is very specific, just either very specific lines, or Justin Cormack's talk, he described how they should potentially be separate branches. But whatever the actual specifics of that are, whatever agents running in your runtime that write back to Git or to your version control, your desired state versioned should be in some way very clearly demarcated from what the rest of your desired state is. And we do that with the image update automation. And I just want to say that in the description, essentially, like, an easy way to say it is something like your actual state is reconciled with what's stated in the desired state. And I think that that's right now kind of ambiguous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I wouldn't use the word reconcile. It's the wrong one, isn't it?
We are slowly moving towards a model in Flux where we can cope with changes to the desired state from the runtime that are, let's say, approved somehow by the cluster admin, by the owner of that thing. And one good example of where Flux fails today is with the vertical pod autoscaler. So if you enable that controller in your cluster, it will fight with Flux forever, right? Because Flux takes the memory requests, CPU requests, and limits from Git, and it will override what that controller is doing. And that controller does not work if you don't specify limits and resources. So it's impossible to use them together, right? So we are looking, and now that server-side apply and managed fields are there in the GA in Kubernetes, with managed fields, Flux could take a decision. Hey, I'm not going to override the limits based on some configuration that the user describes also in Git to Flux. Hey, leave these fields alone and let the runtime scale up and down vertically that particular pod. And that's just one example. There are many other examples there where the runtime has more information for your production workloads than the desired state. And at some point, you want to let the runtime do its own thing, maybe write back some changes. I don't know, HPA got 100 pods, maybe at, I don't know, 10 minutes, you want to write that information back somehow to Git and so on. If something happens with the cluster and you respin another cluster, you'll preserve that last version of the replica set. And
yeah,
so
essentially the compiled or calculated changes by those agents in your runtime based on your configurations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's similar to what Flagger does, right? Flagger has, and very recently, like when speaking about this, I realized that fits into the fifth, like it really does fit very cleanly into the fifth principle of GitOps, that in a lot of the versions that have been put forward, not all of them, but that describe a closed loop. That ultimately in control theory, there's feedback, and based on that feedback, the controllers may do different things. So it fits very, very well. So if we can, and even other tools could fix what you're saying, with the managed fields, that would work. And we could not explain it that way, but we could sort of like describe it within that category.
I think it sounds like
the way you're sorry.
detail for the project description. So I think like if the GitOps working group is formulating these principles, we should definitely link to them, like from a
For sure.
maybe like the core concepts. This is what GitOps is, or but
Yeah, I'm all
so
for linking from our core concepts to the GitOps working group documentation.
yeah.
And another way of looking at that, by the way, is not to say that if you're using a pod autoscaler that you are stepping outside having a desired state. It is, you are just defining your desired state in a different way, in which some pieces are left to the runtime system to figure out, right? So it's not really anything different, in the sense that, in the same way as if you are defining a deployment rather than the individual pods, you are saying, I want the
It's the same
runtime
stuff, exactly.
part of this
Yes.
to be decided by the thing. So you're not really stepping out of this desired state idea. You're just leaving some things. You're saying this is abstracted. This detail is left abstracted in the desired state. Something will take care of that. And then the managed fields stuff is really about detecting when you have an incorrect system, where you have said both of, I want this to be determined at runtime, but also I'm defining it as a desired state, and other such conflicts. But basically that's a problem with correctness. Your system is not correct, right? Because you've defined something in two different places. You said abstractly, this part is in control, but also this part is in control, and those two things can't be both true.
Yeah, technically, that's where we are today. I mean, that's how the vertical pod autoscaler works. You have to define resources for it to modify them. Resources requests, right? So it's not actually a conflict if the vertical pod autoscaler policy is in Git. So what Flux should do is, hey, do I have a policy that sets these things up? Yes, then I will let the owner, the vertical pod autoscaler, do his thing, and I'll never override it because I have a policy that it is described, right? So it should by default authorize the vertical pod autoscaler because the policy is there in Git. Right?
Yeah, and yes, so that might be an example of a place where technically you are doing what I was describing, like you're saying, here is the desired state, but I only care about these things, and these things are under control of something else. But actually the system doesn't let you do that because the schema for that object means you have to supply values there. So we have to finesse that a bit, but yes. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, like, one way I've kind of been describing it is just simply like the general concept of pinning. You know what I mean? Where you often have deploy tools that have a range or some sort of logic within which whatever happens to be latest or whatever happens to be easiest to get or whatever is relevant and fine. Or something like a lock file, it's essentially a concept of locking and pinning, and I think it makes sense for GitOps and for Flux because, we do leave certain things up to the cluster, but in the case of, let's say, scaling up a new cluster, you know what I mean? Like if not just vertical not just vertical scaling, but let's say you're using cluster API and you really want to say, okay, well, I want 10 new clusters. Well, you don't want those to be on different versions, even if they do match the range that you've specified are okay. Same with in the case of a disaster recovery, if say you're not scaling, you just have you've got 2 clusters or 3 and one just dies, so you have to spin up a new one. Well, what version should that be on? So I think that that's where it's exactly like what you said, Stefan. The image automation is exactly like any of these other things that where your desired state specifies a range of allowable things. You can then have an agent to help, so you don't have to just constantly check, is there something new? Is there something new? I'm going to update Git. Your agent does that for you. And, whether that's calculating dates, whether that's, package versions, you know what I mean?
Yes. source controller does that for Helm charts and Git Semver releases as well. You can say, hey, give me the latest stable release of that chart, or fetch me the manifest from the stable latest Semver release of this repo.
Exactly, but we don't currently write that back to Git though, yet.
No, it doesn't write anything to Git, right?
Yeah.
So that's an issue we have right now. We should, in the future, port a lot of people asked for this after a lot of people saw the image automation that we built in version 2, and they asked for, hey, I want to do the same stuff for my Helm chart version or for my Git repository Semver tag.
Exactly.
Right? Because they want that thing written there in Git and in their Git history. So
there's two things going on there, isn't there? There's as with the image thing actually. So there is the one being able to define your system in abstract terms and let the runtime take care of the details. That's one thing. But the other thing is that you have to have a recovery point. It has to be repeatable, right? So that's sort of the reason why you don't use latest tags, is that if you then image tags, if you then deploy that again, you don't know what you're going to get. So you do in general want to pin to either an exact tag or even better, an exact digest. And it's the same with lots of other stuff. Like if you, the horizontal pod autoscaler is a really great example, because so the kind of stages you go through, you say, okay, I'm going to define the deployment with the replicas, and Flux will think that. And then now I want to scale that. And now the autoscaler and Flux fight. So you say, okay, well, what I'll do is not define it. And so the pod autoscaler will take care of the replicas, which is fine until you have to recover, and then you recover with 0 thing. So you do want to have
with one replica.
Yeah, so you want both of those things. Yeah, one, sorry, yeah. So you want both of those things. You want to define it as abstractly, say, you know, the number of replicas can actually vary, something else is in control of that, but you also want to recover to a reasonable position. So there's two things, and that's why people want the chart thing as well. They want to say, any minor version is fine, just use the latest one. However, if I have to rebuild this thing, I want whatever it was on, because I want that system back again. So yeah, that's something we haven't quite figured out, but I would say we know how to do that.
For Git Semver tags and for Helm chart Semver versions, there is no other support. It's only Semver for Helm chart, so it's easier. We have all the machinery that we can reuse from the image automation controller to actually pin those Git repositories, those Helm charts to the latest version as it was discovered by source controller. We just, I don't know, we have to extend image automation, or I don't know, create a new controller that knows how to automate things like, you know, Semver or whatever. Doesn't matter if it's a Helm chart or if it's a container image or if it's a Git release. In the end, it's just a replacing the YAML.
So I think just one question is, and by the way, I like that idea. You know, like however it's architected, whether there's a central package that each controller that's responsible for one of those domains shares and, you know, does it similarly, or whether there's a central controller that they each use to say, hey, do this write back for me. My question, I guess my one question was, have we talked yet about? I know there's been a public announcement of libgitops. Have we talked? Do we have?
Okay.
Well, there has, in the sense that it was proposed, not with any specific plans, but just a description of it was proposed also for KubeCon as well. It's not on the schedule because I think that one didn't get accepted. Unfortunately, I think it would be a really awesome talk, but do we have we been talking about like let me be a little bit more clear with my question, a little bit more judicious here. Do we have refactoring plans that relate to GA at all that have to do with using libraries like this for write back? Or is this something that is just, okay?
No.
Okay.
No.
No,
We-
I mean, there's no reason to use it at present.
Okay.
Image automation uses KYAML, and that works happily.
Okay.
It does exactly, I mean, by design, that does exactly what it wants.
Right. So we just, so basically our strategy across the board for Flux for now would be we expect users to use an image annotation strategy so it's very clear where writebacks go, so they don't have to worry about, say, your runtime competing with your desired state that you specify, right?
Yeah, and also KYAML has the capability of replacing more than one thing. You can definitely patch the resource requests and limits. You can definitely patch the number of replicas on a deployment. It works really great. It's well maintained. libgitops has no commits since a year and a half.
Okay. Okay.
I think I have a feeling there's a development branch where Lucas has been doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's just not the master or main branch. But yeah, I mean, if there was some reason, like something that libgitops did that we were already doing, but it did it in a really like it took a burden off any of the automation, then it should be considered. But that's not the case at present, no.
Got it. And that would just be something that's changed under the hood anyway, not something end users would have to worry about.
Correct. I don't think we would design features specifically to use libgitops because it exists. Put it that way. That seems like putting the cart before the horse.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Then my question is totally answered.
Yeah. Secondly, kubectl now uses KYAML as well. So we really want to make sure that whatever patches kubectl does, we are using the same technology as upstream, and we confirm to all the things that KYAML does. For example, it has a strict way of formatting YAML and so on, and we really want to, you know, be there with upstream and not create some parallel universe on our own on patching YAMLs and so on, since so many people are working on KYAML and all the things around it, and it's based on Go YAML and so on. So there is a huge community around this.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think maybe libgitops, maybe there is some automation somewhere that kind of suits how it thinks of the world, and maybe, you know, even some, like for instance, people find particular aspects of how image automation works difficult to get their heads around, and there is room in the API deliberately for having different ways of updating the Git repo, right? Off the top of my head, I can't think of one that suits libgitops especially, but so I'm just saying, kind of never say never.
Right.
Maybe there would be one, unclear.
So that could always be added if there were reasons to do so. We would make sure to support the backwards functionality from KYAML anyway. You know, even if there was a new tool that did,
it would be an alternative. That's right.
Yeah, we would still make sure to do that because we're not trying to. We are holding to our Semver promise for Flux.
Yeah, backward compatibility.
Also,
and people do still want that one.
Right.
I wouldn't do away with it.
Right.
Some people do like it.
Yep.
And there are very different use cases between what we do with KYAML and what libgitops does with KYAML, because it also uses KYAML and other stuff. For example, we in Flux, we want to patch specific things like an image tag or a Helm chart version, or we want to bring some small patches from the cluster like the replica set and so on. And KYAML works great for this with that level of abstraction that it brings. You just add, a marker inside your YAMLs, and that's how you allow us to patch stuff. While libgitops, in my opinion, has a different use case where, let's say you have a Flux UI where people do stuff with objects, they describe them in a visual way. I don't know, maybe they drag and drop stuff and things like that. And all those changes compiled into custom resources, or they modify things. libgitops could be used to write back to Git all those changes with no markers and anything, because it's the human that does the change, right? So it doesn't need to double approve it or something like that. So that's where I see the power of libgitops, and the idea behind it is not about bringing back patches of HPA or VPA. It's about, letting people define policies and all this stuff visually and transform those to YAML and write that YAML back to Git. That's where it's powerful. That's how I see it.
Makes sense. Yes.
Okay. We're a little over time already. I think that was all that was on the agenda. So I guess see you next week.
Sure.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Cheers.
Thank you very much.